Okay, next we're going to add the ability for the player to shoot a bullet. So to do that, we're going to need to create a bullet object. So I'm going to double click on my screen, add a new sprite. So under General, find the Spacer Invaders icon that says Sprite. We're going to name this Bullet. Insert, click where I want that to show up, and I'm going to load the bullet image. I can close that window. Now the bullet also needs a behavior, so while that's selected, we'll go to Behaviors, add new behavior, and we're going to go to Movements, Bullet, and hit Add. So now when I run this, we'll see that the bullet moves nice and slow. So while the bullet is still selected, I'm going to take the speed and change that to 1,000. I don't want it to be too fast that I can't see it, but I want it to be significantly faster than the player, and that seems like a good speed. There's another behavior I want to add, but let's go to Event Sheet and we'll check why I want to add that in a little bit. So next I'm going to have the player create bullets when we click the mouse. So our event is going to be a mouse click. So I'm going to add event. The condition is going to come from the mouse because it's a mouse click. And then we want to do on click. And then the default is left click. That's fine. So I'm going to click done. So anytime there's a mouse click, notice that this is event number 2. It should not be up here. If it is attached to every tick on part of 1, then that's not going to work correctly. So make sure it's a separate event on event number 2. Then the action we're going to add is that we want the player to shoot a bullet. So the action is coming from the player, so we're going to choose them, and then we want the player to shoot a bullet. Well, the way that is phrased is the player is actually going to spawn a bullet object. So since there is such a long list here of player actions, I'm going to search for spawn to narrow it down. So I'm going to have the player spawn another object. The object is going to be a bullet object. And we'll leave it at layer 0 and image point 1 or image point 0 for now. We'll switch it to 1 later and we'll show you why in just a second. So if I run that, every time I click, it shoots, and it shoots in the direction of the mouse. But you'll see that it's coming out of his face there instead of out of the end of the gun. So we fix that by opening up our player. Since I'm on the event sheet, I'm just going to go to the player in my project bar and open him from there. And I'm going to go down to the Edit Image Points tool, and you will see that the origin is in the middle. I don't want to move that. So if you end up accidentally changing that here, you fix it by doing right click, quick assign, putting that back in the middle. We want to create a new image point for the gun. Actually, let's go ahead and mess up the origin so that you can see what that looks like. So if I run that with it wrong, you'll see that we rotate around the gun instead of the player, and that looks funny. So that's why we want the origin to be in the middle. And then that's an okay spot. So we run that. This part's fixed. It still shoots out of his face because we haven't changed where the bullet comes from. So I'm going to double click that action. Image point, we'll make that image point 1. And then you'll see that when we run that, it now comes where comes out of the gun where it's supposed to. And again here, it's going with this number. So when you choose image point 1 or image point 0, it's the number that's in the image point list, not the name. Now I'm going to run this in Debug. So I'm going to click the little down arrow next to the preview, and I'm going to go to Debug. And that's to show that whenever I shoot a bunch of bullets, that the game keeps track of all of those forever. So you'll see that I have 42 bullets, and if I click on one of them randomly say number 3, we'll see that it's still keeping track of the X and the Y coordinate, and it's, you know, somewhere way off up and to the right. And it's constantly keeping track of that, and we have, you know, about 2% of the CPU being used. Not a lot, but if we have thousands of these, it could make our game run slower. So to fix that, go back to layout 1, go to my bullet, make sure I have edit behaviors pulled up to bring up my bullet behaviors. I still had it up, but if you didn't, that's how you'd get it back up. We'll click add new behavior, and we want to destroy the bullet as soon as it leaves the layout. So we'll add that, and now when we run it, in debug layout so that we can see how many we have, you'll see that as I click, that number goes back down to 0 as soon as they're all off the screen. And instead of running at 2%, we're now running at 1 or just under 1. So now we're finished with adding the ability for our player to shoot bullets.